Welcome, one and all, to a Monday ritual known as the Ultimate Hockey Show. Michael Darrow alongside Rick Petty. Michael on the left, Rick on the right. Welcome back to the Ultimate Hockey Show. Rick, since we last spoke, we have a Stanley Cup champion. And we're in the process of figuring out who is going to go to the Memorial Cup final. It was a game between the Bulldogs and the Sweeney Cataracts for the right to play the host St. John Sea Dogs in the Memorial Cup final on Wednesday. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Since we last spoke, we also have a Stanley Cup champion that was crowned last night. I just want to touch on some breaking news here quickly. That is breaking, but I feel like I should address because it just came out on our social media channels very, very quickly. The only thing I'll say about that is Daryl Media, in conjunction with Game Time TV, has terminated, in conjunction with Viavid Canada, its distribution agreement for Game Time TV. Viavid will continue to distribute Game Time TV content through to the end of Sunday, the 31st of July. I look forward to announcing a new distribution agreement in the not too distant future. So I just thought I'd mention that since it's floating around on the channel. Right now, I just put that out before the show. Just got out of a really exciting meeting to address that. So I thought I'd get that out there because it has been floating around there for some time on our channels. This is just official confirmation of that. We say good evening to Red Petty, who is joining us remotely. Once again, as we've done this show remotely during the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I have confirmation that might be changing again. The details of which will be announced at the appropriate time. Partially because I haven't informed Rick of this change yet, which I plan to do after the show.
It's okay. I'm just an employee. It's fine. You could just
no, but we will.
Board.
We'll address it when the time comes. But I'm really excited to have some of the stuff we have cooking. That being said, exciting news: Colorado Avalanche have won the 2022 Stanley Cup champions. I guess they've won the Stanley Cup. Rick, your thoughts on what transpired last night?
Okay. Last night, very interesting, from going from a 7-0 hockey game and a 6-2 game the other way, and the last couple of games, or last 3 games, have all been 1-goal games. One in overtime, I believe, and the other 2 just 1-goal games. Like it got more serious. As it got more serious, you saw everybody say, I don't want to be on the ice when a goal gets scored against. I'm going to make sure that I do everything I can to keep the puck out of my own end and out of my own net. It's just interesting. There were enough chances for either team to score a few, but really surprising. Colorado played much better yesterday than they did on Friday. Completely different. Several of the players, including Cale Makar and McKinnon and Nathan McKinnon, both weren't very good on Friday. I think Makar was -2 and McKinnon was -1. So they knew they had to be better. They're the 2 superstars. No, they're not the captain, but the 2 real superstars in that team. And they played much better yesterday. And would you argue, like, if you said now, without knowing, if you just knew all the game results up until last night, and you said, who is the best team in the playoffs this year? It's Colorado by a long shot, right? Like it's not a surprise that they went over the course of these 4 rounds, they went 16-4, which is pretty incredible. In essence, they went 4-1 every 5 games. They won 4 out of 5 games. So they lost 2 against St. Louis?
Yep.
2 against St. Louis. No, that was a second round. They They
One
swept.
to Nashville.
Yeah, they swept Nashville, lost 2 against St. Louis, lost none
2 against
against
Tampa.
Edmonton, and then lost 2 against Tampa Bay. So it's a credit. They are by far the better team. They earned it. There's no fluke. There's no riding a really hot goalie and you're just hanging on and winning games. I thought Colorado was by far the better team. They got tons of talent. And the scary part is they've got still lots of young players on that team that could make them very competitive for a number of years if they're able to hang on to all of them. So how about
Yeah,
you?
yeah. Yeah, I just received a note. Rob, apparently you were commenting, but it is on the wrong feed. I'm getting them showing up on my phone instead of on my screen here. So can you make sure that you comment? And this goes for everybody. Make sure that you comment on the Game Time TV Facebook page. Otherwise, I won't see your comment. I'd like to see your comments to share them. On my phone, it is a little bit hard to see them. So I'd like to be able to put them on the screen because you have a lot to say about that. You and I have had some conversations and others over the course of time. I have a feeling some of those conversations might have to pertain to Barry Trotz saying no to the Jets and the Jets having to move on, but we'll address that in just a minute. But what do you sit on this dynasty versus the beginning of a legacy, if I may use a word from Kelmatar? Like, is this the chance for Colorado to start to maybe do, 2 out of 3 couple cup finals in a row, or is it too early to make these comparisons? Because I'm hearing that it's the dynasty against, the team that wants to develop a legacy, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, it is hard to win the Stanley Cup, and it's really hard to repeat. The fact that Tampa Bay repeated the last 2 years is incredible when you think about how difficult it is to win 4 rounds, best of 7, and stay injury free and stay to your game and have your superstars not really go into any funks and be your best players, have really good goaltending and have your goaltending stay healthy. All those things to happen. And then to be a superstar team, that's really hard to do. I think the days of being like winning 4 or 5 in a row, I just think with the salary cap now and just the way everything kind of flattens out and guys hit free agency and you can't hang on to everybody and your talented players. Like, look at every team this year. Like, look at the Jets. They lost Andrew Kopp. He's a really good player, just coming into his prime at 27, gone. Look at Jacob Trouba. They have to trade him because he's not going to sign a long-term deal. You got to. So I'm saying every team's going to go through that, which means it's going to be hard to keep your core and hard to do it. But that being said, Colorado's a very good team. At the same time, though, the Tampa Bay is not old. I mean, they're a little bit older than Colorado, but Tampa Bay, you could argue, and I could make the argument, and you'd be hard pressed to argue against me. Getting to the final was a much harder and challenging road for Tampa Bay than it was for Colorado. And that's to take nothing away from Colorado. But Tampa Bay went 7 games with the Leafs, who were the better team. They had the most valuable player in the league in Austin Matthews and in a high-powered offense, and they took them to 7 games and they won. Then Tampa Bay went to Florida, the President's Trophy winner, and beat them in 4, still 4 tough games. Then they go on, they play the New York Rangers, who have overcome Carolina and Pittsburgh to get there. And they were taken to they were taken to 6 games by the New York Rangers. So I just think compared to what Colorado had to do, I think it was a much harder road for Tampa Bay, and they'll never admit it because they're pros and they're good guys. Hockey players are good. I think they ran out of a little bit of gas relative to Colorado. But at the same time, things could switch next year. The West could be a little bit of a harder road, and you could see Tampa Bay in the final, and that would not be a surprise to me at all. So,
well, here's the interesting bit. I think to back up your point about Tampa having a more difficult road, every single team that was in the Eastern Conference playoffs this year was 100+ points.
Yep.
Colorado maybe had the easier road with Nashville. They got the benefit of a doubt with Minnesota, with St. Louis. and then in the conference final, maybe lucked out on a lackluster division perhaps, but was the Pacific.
Yep.
Um, but you could argue the game within the games against, the Colorado Avalanche. Maybe that shouldn't have been a sweep. Maybe that was more like a 6-game series. But the fact of the matter is, it was a sweep. Um, and what I found really interesting, Rick,
Yeah.
is both goalies for Colorado had 6 or more wins as part of this playoff run. So it's not just, the one goalie getting, 16 wins to get here. This was truly a team effort amongst the goaltenders for Colorado. And as far as Tampa goes, um, I don't know how much of a game you saw yesterday, Red. Um, to me, it just looked like, and you could agree with me or you could disagree, but it just looked like when Colorado took that 2-1 lead and had that big shift early in the third period, where Corey Perry didn't deposit the 2-on-1 chance there early in the third period to try to tie it, and then
Yeah.
Colorado came back with that relentless shift that was over a minute in the offensive zone. You could just kind of see the will of Tampa Bay just start to break, not obviously, but you could just tell that they were, on fumes. And to me, I don't think they were as mentally sharp yesterday as they were in previous games or previous Stanley Cup finals. And I think at the end of the day, and we could argue till we're blue in the face about this. I think there's something to be said about 2 cups, and then going back to a final for the third one. How much that takes out of a team
Yeah.
relative to, and not including the major injuries that Coach Cooper seemed to allude to yesterday when I don't know if you caught his interview with Kevin Weets. He thought this was one of his better teams as far as what they had to overcome, but yet um, he basically came out and said that Anthony Cirelli and Braden Point shouldn't have played till September. So I think we'll find out tomorrow what those guys were dealing with. Um, to me, I don't think it's anything minor. Um, and it's just the ability of those guys leaving, uh, getting treatment, and then it's just when you think that you've lost them for some time. Um, just when you think you've lost them for some time, they're back on the bench and back on the ice, and just that took a lot of admiration, I guess, for John Cooper
Yeah.
to suggest that. So, you know, as much as we think, Rich, it just puts into perspective. Now, I realize it's a completely different team between the '80s and now, but Rich, I think it puts in perspective, cap era or not, how difficult and what the Islanders and Oilers did to each other and the NHL in the '80s, rotating and winning multiple Stanley Cups in a row. I think it just puts that into perspective about how difficult and uh, how those teams are really to be admired and commended. Granted, it was a different era, but winning 4 Stanley Cups and 3 Stanley Cups in a row, it's extremely difficult. Never mind back to back in this cap era, and I think people gained a new understanding and a new respect for those Oiler and Islander teams in the '80s to do what they did. Granted, this is the salary cap era,
Yeah.
wasn't salary cap era back then, but still to win 4 championships in a row, 3 championships in a row, depending on the team, I think is still to be commended. And I would just put this up there right with that, with the caveat that yes, this is a cap league. And I think, to be honest, it should be commended as one of the greatest dynasties ever. Despite not winning the third Stanley Cup, to win 2 in a row in the tap era,
Yeah.
get back to the final, you don't win the final, but um, as we wait, yeah, but you don't win that final. But I think it just puts into perspective those Oiler Islander and just how special those runs were
Very special.
and
Yep.
how difficult it's gonna be to replicate that.
Very difficult. And it's like I said, it's a different era, right? Like back then, teams could load up on their talent. There was no salary cap. You could keep as many guys as you wanted. You could have pay them whatever you wanted until you said, I don't want to pay guys any more money because it costs me too much money. And then you trade them off for draft picks. So that's where teams could keep. Like you think about it now, could any team keep Brian Trottier, Mike Bossy, Denny Potvin, Clark Gillies, Bob Nystrom, uh, Ken Morrow? Like you just go down that lineup. Like the players that on that team, you couldn't keep half those guys on a team now because you'd be way over the salary cap if you paid them what they were making. Or same thing with the Oilers. Can you imagine now trying to keep Gretzky, Messier, Coffey, Anderson, Curry?
Sure.
Oh man, you just go down the list. Forget it. It would never happen. And that's why you could have like exactly like what they did Tampa Bay. You could have them win one, maybe two, and they had help last year, as we talked about circumventing the cap by having the Kucherov sitting in the weeds until he came off the injured reserve list right at playoff time to circumvent a cap hit and keep all those extra players. So teams even have to be kind of, I'll say fishy is not the right word. I'm not going to say that, but teams took advantage, or Tampa Bay took advantage of that. How about that? To be as talented as they were. So I just don't.
And it's funny because Jerry Bettman was saying in his address prior to Game 1 that there was some kind of a solution that had to be worked out as far as teams circumvented salary caps. But he said it's got nothing to do with Tampa, which I found very, very interesting. So it sounds like there's dead money in the NHL system, which they have to try to address going forward, whatever that means. So it's just very interesting, and I'll pose this question to you because I think it's very interesting. Colorado at the deadline.
You're freezing.
Okay, hang on. Sorry about that. My internet is freezing up again. They got Josh Manson at the deadline. They made a couple of other, trades. This was the 1 year at where I don't know if Colorado gets to where they are without Josh Manson and those trade deadline pieces, putting them over the top. Because those guys had, fairly significant roles on that Colorado team. So, and that goes to scouting, right? To bring in guys that, kind of fit that bill. Okay, this is what we need. And it's interesting because we just about Joe Sakic as a player and now as an exec. Boy, oh boy. But you know what? He's got his work cut out for him. They got a lot of free agents that they got to try to retain. Josh Manton, Darcy Kemper, Nazem Kadri, among a few others. He also have a $9 million cap hit kicking in with Kale McCarr. So, it's not going to be as easy to run this back. But as people say, maybe players take a little bit less to stay there on the condition that they win. I also don't think that this slams, the door closed on the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think they retool, they rejig, and I think the odds makers are right when they say that Tampa had the best odds to win, third best odds, to win the Cup next year behind the Toronto Maple Leafs, which was number 2, which was surprising to me. And of course, the champions who have the best odds right now amongst the bettors in Las Vegas to win a title. So it's interesting, right? While I'm not quite ready to declare that the Tampa window is done. Colorado's window might just be starting. And I'll tell you what, winning the Stanley Cup is a pretty good sales pitch for guys to take a little bit less. And let's be honest,
Let's
we've
see.
seen the NHL be a copycat league. Um, what the team's trying to replicate the previous year's Stanley Cup. It's like one of their players said yesterday. Because the question was asked, I think it was on the American broadcast. The NHL is a copycat league. How does one sort of emulate your team? It was directed at one of the Colorado Avalanche, and the answer, kind of tongue in cheek, and it was 100% serious, was, "Well, they got to find a Cale Makar and." So defensemen like Cale Makar don't grow on trees. So,
Yep.
that's kind of interesting, right?
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's
It's
going
your
to be interesting because now everybody didn't want to be like Colorado, just like the big and
well,
heavy. Everybody wanted to be that big and heavy team like LA, right? So, I mean, it throws the copycat lead completely out the window.
yeah. I don't know about that. I think you can win in multiple ways. If you have a big, heavy team that makes it hard to play against you, and you play a defensive system, you have great goaltending, and you bang and you crash, and you get enough scoring from your talented players, you can win. That's what LA did. That's what St. Louis did, right? But then there's other teams like Pittsburgh, that the 1 year, I guess a few years back, where they won, where they had no heavy defensemen. They were all puck movers. They're skating. And how did they win? They won by outscoring and outskating and out talenting, for lack of a better word, because that's not really a word, but out talent wise other teams. Colorado's done the same thing. They're not really a heavy team. They got some guys that can bang and crash, but that's not their style. They skate, attack, score, force you to make mistakes, force turnovers, and they won with that because they have the ability to do that. And they had very average goaltending. They didn't have a superstar goaltender, but they had superstar defensemen who could move the puck and superstar scorers, and they didn't have to play heavy and crash. So I think there's multiple ways to win. The problem is you just got to get the right, everything has to come together, right? It's got to be all those things, like either you're the heavy team or you're the skill team, the skating team, but you still have to stay injury free. You've got to have great goaltending. You got to have some luck. You got to win a few games in overtime that you kind of fluke your way into winning. A shot goes off a skate. All that stuff kind of has to play together to make it happen. But sure, if you want to go copycat, go ahead. But like you say, how are you going to find, we got to do like Colorado. We got to find a Cale Makar, a Nathan McKinnon, a Nazem Kadri, a Devin Taves. You can't do that. You got to make your own team. You got to make your own formula and make it work and put it together and see what happens, right? So listen, Colorado's a good team. I think Tampa Bay, Toronto, Florida now hiring Paul Maurice as head coach. We might talk about that. I was saying there's lots of teams that were in the playoffs this year. The Rangers too. They're set up to do well for a number of years. They're young, they're talented, and you could have any one of those handful of teams rise up and be a great team next year and get past Tampa Bay and Colorado and win the Stanley Cup. So I don't know. As much as you say there's copycat, it's hard to copycat because then you got to change your whole team. And then if another team wins another way the next year, then you got to throw that all out sort of again. I'm not so sure about that. It's hard to copycat in a short window of time. So to change your team with free agency and with draft picks, that takes time, especially a team like Winnipeg, who's not as attractive for free agents as potentially other teams would be. So, but that being said, we'll give kudos to Colorado. I won the last round. And interestingly enough, just to give people an idea, going into the final round, you were up by 1 point, 13-12. I picked Colorado in 7. You picked Tampa Bay in 7. Colorado won in 6. I get 1 point. You get 0 points. 0 points. So we are tied. We have a tied score at the end.
Again. We always seem to end this thing tied. It's ridiculous.
It is tied.
I think it's
And
been like that the last 3 years we've run this, and it's been a tire at or near, um, situations. Just a couple funny notes from last night before we move on to the coaching search, if you don't mind.
okay,
Gary Bettman was contracted COVID-19. He did not present the Stanley Cup, which is uh, which is interesting because, as Rob says, and I 100% agree, uh, Bill Daly received quite a loud roar from the crowd at Amalie Arena compared to Gary Bettman, who always seemed to get booed. I don't know what it is with commissioners. It's Commissioner Goodell, uh, at the NFL draft. Adam Silver gets booed. Gary Bettman gets booed. Don Garver gets booed. Rob Manfred gets booed. I
part of the
don't know what
territory.
to make of commissioners getting booed, and then last night it was Bill Daly getting a cheer. I don't know what to read into that,
It's
but
part of the territory. Don't read too much. It's part of the
no,
territory.
I
You're the
know.
boss.
Yeah,
So
it's just interesting, right? Because I think we saw a little bit of a window into the post Gary Bettman uh, era, perhaps.
what?
Not to
Wait a
say,
second. If Bill Daly becomes uh, a commissioner of the NHL, all he has to do is hold one press conference or go through one labor dispute or something like that. And, Bill Daly will come out and he'll get booed too. Okay. It's all those commissioners, they've had to make really tough decisions. They've had to make decisions on, um, like for the NFL, that whole issue with not standing for the national anthem. With Bettman, he's been through multiple um, labor disruptions and labor disputes.
yeah,
For baseball, there's been multiple issues with that whole Houston Arrow and Houston Astros and the cheating and how much they got suspended, how much came down in terms of punishment. So all the commissioners, you could say, oh, they all get booed, but you know what? They sometimes make some lousy decisions, and if they make lousy decisions, you're going to get booed. So that's
it's interesting, Rich, just to kind of put a bow on that discussion. I reckon being a commissioner kind of like being a prime minister or a president. One bad situation and your approval rating takes a plummet. Well, same
yeah,
deal. I
yeah.
think your ultimate approval rating is with your fan base, and it comes with the territory. It sounds like most commissioners just embrace it. Uh, to an extent. I just found that to be very interesting. The other thing is it took the Stanley Cup all of 10 minutes before it had its first dent. One of the Avalanche was skating with the pitcher with the Stanley Cup into the team pitcher, and he basically did an oops, slid the Stanley Cup on the ice, did the old legs out from under him and the team pitcher. Stanley Cup got dented pretty significantly on the side. It comes with the territory. I can't find a trophy that hasn't been dinged up over the course of celebrations, at least in professional sports. So that was kind of funny for everybody that kind of wanted a lighthearted moment. On a more serious note, Rhett, let's get to the coaching carousel because Rob has had some comment in here that I'd like to address in regards to the coaching uh, situation. Something that has happened this year or this week, we addressed it already. I think on last week's show, Bruce Cassidy, now the coach of the Vegas Golden Knights,
yeah,
Pete DeBoer, now the head coach of the Dallas Stars on a 4-year term. One of the stories this week, Barry Trotz informing the Jets that he will not be their next head coach,
yeah.
electing to spend time with family for this year. Um, Now, something that I think has been in the consternation of some, and I know this has been an opinion of Rob's. Uh, he says, as for my thoughts on the Jets coaching staff, I feel like they spent too much time courting Barry Trotz, knowing that he very easily could have turned them down for a variety of reasons. More importantly, taking care of himself or his family. This may well have caused them to miss out on one or more of the other coaches that have been hired by other teams for the same situation. In both of your estimations, who is the best remaining candidate to fill? And I'm presuming this is the position here. Some of the comment is cut off because it's really long. Um, and I'll start with this one because I think it needs to be addressed. I, for one, do not believe that Barry Trotz was the only person that the Winnipeg Jets talked to. I
We know
think
that
there.
as fact. Wait, whoa, whoa,
So
whoa, whoa. We know that as fact. We know
yeah,
that the Jets talked to multiple people. Interviewed,
yeah.
never
So
talked.
so I think this notion that the Jets lost out on coaches because they waited for Barry Trotz. Well, one, I would argue, wouldn't you do the same if you knew you had a fighting chance to get one of the greatest coaches, the winningest coaches in the NHL? And I think you're completely doing yourself a disservice if you're not looking into options. And to be quite honest with you, I don't believe any of the coaches that were currently hired would ever want to come to Winnipeg. Bruce Cassidy to me doesn't strike me as a Winnipeg guy. Pete DeBoer you could have some conversation about. Um, to me though, they don't strike me as true north guys. And I think to have that thought that all the Jets lost out on somebody. Okay, sure, but they just about gained one of the winningest coaches in NHL history.
Mhm.
And to me, you're doing a complete disservice if you're saying we're only focusing on Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz is our guy, and if we get him, great. If not, there were other conversations that were had. Jim Montgomery, to me, I think now becomes the instant candidate. Jim Montgomery to talk to, Scott Arniel. I think he's still there, even though an associate role is more like it. The fact of the matter is, I fully believe that. I fully believe that they just didn't talk to just Barry Trotz. I think it was a wide net of people, and I would suggest that there's also a wide net of people that haven't been mentioned that they talked to.
Could
And
be. We might not look. True North is so good at keeping everything under wraps. So it could very well be they interviewed. I mean, they interviewed already Dave Lowry. That we know.
yeah,
So Dave Lowry, Barry Trotz, Scott Arniel, we know right off the hop. Who
yeah,
else they have? They could have interviewed another 10 people, formal interviews. We just don't know. And now that Trotz has kind of pulled his name out, now the names get shuffled and they revisit and they circle back and they go back to the beginning. But they're gonna have to find somebody in the next week because by by July the 1st, like it's or whatever it is, it's
um,
only 2 weeks until the draft, and they've got to have a head coach in place before the draft. They have to.
yeah, and but I think they're further along in the process.
You're freezing again, buddy.
Okay, sorry about that, man. My internet's just not cooperating today. But can you hear me okay?
You're back, baby.
Okay, sorry, I tried a different setting here. We'll see if that holds.
Okay.
Just required a complete reboot. Um, for sure. Sorry about that, folks. But yeah, no, I just think you're doing yourself a disservice if you didn't talk to other people. Um, so with knowing what you know, let's get into this a little bit before we get to the Maurice to Florida scenario, because I think that's something that not a lot of people saw. If you're
Okay.
having shovel day off, who are you hiring right now?
Who do I want as head coach?
Yeah, but if you're hiring, you just found out that Barry Trotz, is not an option. Um,
I don't know. I don't know.
who,
I would
who do
say
you
this.
want? I
I
mean,
don't.
Jim Montgomery, Claude Julien, Elaine Vigneault.
What has Jim Montgomery ever won
Well, he was with the Dallas Stars and 2 Stanley Cups with Craig Berube.
with the Dallas Stars?
Yeah, Montgomery was the head coach of the Dallas Stars. Then he went into rehabilitation for substance issues. He came out of that program and was the assistant coach for Craig Berube in St. Louis,
And then went to the Stanley Cup with him?
and was with Berube the last 2 seasons.
Okay. So
So,
after so he hasn't won anything. That was
he
after the
hasn't
Stanley.
yeah, my mistake. He hasn't won anything yet.
Correct.
Also
So
was the
let me just say this.
biggest.
Okay. He's not. I don't know what the Jets. I maybe should qualify this. I don't know who the Jets should hire now that Trotz is off. To me, it's Trotz, and now everything else is a bunch of brown apples that have fallen off the tree. He was the one ripe, juicy one at the top of the tree, at the branch that was hard to get at, even when you stood on the top rung of the ladder. And now that apple is gone. And now what? Now you got to pick from what's fallen down on the ground, and that's all bruised and brown and overripe. And the birds won't even touch it because it's too overripe. Maybe the ants and the flies are starting to eat it. So, and again, that's a little bit harsh. But I'm just saying, you're second best now. You're picking. All I know is this: the Jets need to find a coach who is an experienced coach. Number one, or I don't even know what's more. I know number one, a defensive-minded coach. Number two, with experience. I would even take a younger coach who hasn't really won anything, but is in the mold of Barry Trotz or has worked for Barry Trotz, or Barry Trotz says, "This is my clone. This is my guy. He walks the walk like I do." That's who I want. That's who the Jets need. They don't need a freestyling, wheeling coach. They don't need a tyrant like a Tortorella or a Carlisle. And they don't need a weakling like an Alain Vigneault, who's a nice guy, but he just whatever. You need somebody, and you need credibility. You need somebody's going to walk in the dressing room and is immediately going to catch the attention of all the guys in that room, especially the older guys, the veterans. And I don't know who that is. I don't know who's left over to choose from. I honestly don't. You say Jim Montgomery. I don't know. Scott Arniel, maybe. What about a Kirk Muller? What about somebody like an assistant coach with one team who's looking for a head coaching position?
And here's a follow up, and I guess this deserves to be in the same brush as well. We found out news this week that PierreLuc Dubois tells the Winnipeg Jets that he intends to test free agency when the time comes. To me, I don't know why that was a bigger story than it wound up being, because newsflash, what player doesn't want to test free agency when he gets an opportunity? But what do you make of that whole thing?
Who doesn't want to touch free agency?
Oh, he wants to test free
Yeah,
agency,
because
and
he's earned the right.
I'm
Yeah,
saying which player doesn't want to test free agency when given the opportunity?
good point.
So, what do
Yeah,
you make of that? Like, to me, I think, you're looking at something that's 2 years away to just have his rights for this coming season, um, and potentially the season after, as well. But what do you make of those comments? Is that just a posturing? Is that just a fix the problem and then we'll talk? Um, what do you make of that?
Well, I can make it a bit this way. Players want money, yeah, but another big driver is being in a winning organization and a good organization. So let me put it out there this way. PierreLuc Dubois, it'd be really good to sign him, to get him past the free agency year, whatever that is, 26 years old or 27, whatever,
Yep.
wherever he ends up. And if the Columbus Blue Jackets can't sign Line and they have to get rid of him, even better. But that being said, I think that if the Jets hire the right coach and they turn this team around and they fix some of the things, fine tune some of the things we've talked about before, about being more defensive minded, about having a better mix of defensemen, upgrading their fourth line, bringing in some of their younger players, signing maybe a free agent or two to upgrade their skill. Then maybe PierreLuc Dubois, after 2 years, if the Jets go to the Stanley Cup Finals the next 2 years and they're on the verge of winning, maybe he says, you know what, I want to sign a deal. Or maybe even after next year, maybe they go to the Western Conference Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, and he's a huge part of it. And the Jets say, listen, we want you here. We're so close. Will you sign a 4-year deal with us and take yourself into free agency? Maybe he signs it. I think it's like Scheifele. Everything's kind of up in the air right now, right? You don't know who the head coach is. You don't know who the assistant coaches are. You don't know where the team is going. You don't know what they're going to do with their free agents and with like how to fix the problems that they've had the last few years. So uncertainty, players don't like that. They like security. And these next 2 years, like the Jets are really going to have to invest in PierreLuc Dubois and in Mark Scheifele and some of the other younger players to say, we're still making something here. We're still going to make something great, and we need you to be on board with it. But on the alternative, similar to Trouba and to Kopp, if you get to the middle of a year and a half from now, right, and Dubois is not signed, you take it right to the trade deadline and you trade him away for something big and something
Do you put any thought into this next year is critical because it has Dubois in the last year of his contract after this year. It has Shifley in the last year before he's an RFA, Hellebuck, and the list goes on. Like, is this not a consequential year for the Winnipeg Jets to show these players that there's some semblance of getting this turned around?
Yes. I think next year is huge. And not just even for the players. I think it's for the fans. I think it's for the city. Like the Jets have to find the right coach and turn this thing around. And you can't go just with a new coach and all the same players. You've got to move out some of the guys that just whatever, if they're not good in the dressing room or, the general manager, the scouts, they can figure that out. They know better than you and I do. We're just on the outside looking in. But the Jets have to be better. They have to be a playoff team next year, and they have to be a contender. They have to be not a wild card team. They have to be in the top 3 in the Central. They have to. With this talent, they have too much talent. Like this year, they underperformed like crazy. And you and I can't figure it out. I still can't figure out why they were as inconsistent and up and down, win 1, lose 1, win 2, lose 2. They never won more than 3 games in a row, never got in a heater, never won 9 or 10 in a row. They began the season 9-3-3, and from there it was all downhill. And I don't know what it is, but they got to fix it and they got to be better, because if they're not better next year, you're going to see 10,000, 11,000 people at hockey games during the week at the at the Bell Center.
Okay, so Rob brings up something interesting that I wanted to touch on. How long are you giving Chevy to prove that he can put a winner on the ice? Like, he just signed a 3-year extension.
Yep. 3 years. 3 years.
You wait that long?
Yeah.
Because to me, that would have been 15 years gone by and very limited results.
Michael, if everybody wins the Stanley Cup in a fair way, your team wins once, maybe twice in your lifetime.
Right.
If you win 1 out of every 32.
I guess that's fair. let's quickly touch on Paul Maurice to Florida, because this is very, very interesting. Where were you when you found out Paul Maurice would be the coach of the Florida Panthers?
Is this like where were you when they announced that the Jets were coming back? It's not that consequential.
No,
I
I
mean, I
know,
like Paul
but
Maurice, but
it's a pretty interesting surprise, because I think everybody kind of thought that Andrew Brunette would be back. But again, the longer you realize, kind of the longer it took for that to be announced, that maybe there was something behind the scenes going on. Um, what do you make of Maurice to Florida, and what's your kind of initial reaction?
I am okay. I'll first say this: I am surprised that Florida did not sign Andrew Burnett to a long-term deal. I mean, he came in there under really tough circumstance and took over for Joel Quenneville. He was Joel Quenneville, or one of Joel Quenneville's assistants. A really awkward situation. One of his good hockey friends has to resign. Now he gets thrust into the head coaching role. And he was smart. He didn't change any of the systems. He kept the systems because they were successful from the previous year with Quenneville. And he managed that. He managed the players. They were the President's Trophy winner. And then they go up against who did they beat in the first round?
Florida?
Yeah.
Washington.
Washington, right? They beat Washington and then they lost to Tampa Bay 4 straight in the second round. So I'm saying, so they got to the second round. Okay, President's Trophy winner, you didn't do it. They're still a young team. Look at Colorado. They had to lose last year in the second round. And a huge disappointing loss. And did Colorado get rid of Bednar and a whole bunch of players? No. They said, we're so close. We're young. You have to learn to win. Sometimes you have to fall down in order to get back up and rise up. So I'm just saying, I'm surprised that Andrew Burnett would not get a chance to do that. But it's the owner's right. They say that they wanted more experience. Okay, so they went out and they got Paul Maurice. Paul Maurice is a winner. It's not surprising. He wants to keep coaching. And this is a smart move for Paul Maurice because you don't have to do like with the Jets, how you had to kind of work with really young players and kind of bring them into the league and maybe down to the minors and up again and coach them up. And, it was a long, like 3, 4, 5-year process before they got to the 2018 and the conference finals. This Florida team is ready to win. I mean, they are loaded for bear. I don't know what it is, but it could just be they ran against a very hot team in Tampa Bay, but they can win. And Paul Maurice is smart to get on this wagon because he's going to win a ton of games next year or over the next few years, which will just add to his win total as a head coach. And he'll have multiple years in the playoffs with a very good team with a chance to win the Stanley Cup. And that's always eluded Paul Maurice. So for Paul Maurice, this is a great, fantastic move.
Yeah, to me, I was really surprised when I found out about this.
Why?
Well, just because it's only 6 months removed from the Jets, and I thought he wanted a break. But I guess 6 months was enough to reinvigorate him, and including the situation, for sure.
Okay, but you're looking at it as he was burned out or he needed to be invigorated or reinvigorated. What about the fact that, like, would you not take at face value what he said, that my message, I just realized to just keep going in there and the guy's not responding to me? Every coach's messaging, his style, that voice, whatever it is, it runs its time. Some run out very quickly, like a John Tortorella or a Randy Carlyle, because it's very grating. Paul Maurice, if you ask all the guys in the dressing room for the Jets, they loved him. And you know why? Because he was a player's coach. He was honest, he was tough, but he was fair. If you weren't in the lineup, he would tell you why and what you needed to do to get back in the lineup. Or if you were sent down to the minors, he was just very good. The guys loved playing for them because he was a straight shooter. He never disrespected his players. You notice that? He never disrespected them in the media after a game, or if they had lost 3 in a row, or if a guy was -5, he'd never call him out. He would just say, we all have to be better or whatever. And guys loved him for it. So I just think he's a very good coach. He's going to get a chance to win in Florida, and now we're going to see what the Jets do. And I think they got to go in a different direction. Maybe that's to tie off
A
the
couple
loose
of
end.
other things really quickly here that we can touch on.
Okay.
There's rumors that the number of the Florida Panthers wanted Bill Zito to keep Andrew Brunette around.
There's what?
Sorry?
There's what with Andrew Burnett?
But multiple Florida Panther players wanted Bill Zito to keep him around, as in the full-time guy.
Okay. So there you go. The players liked him too. So okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just very interesting. And I think to be quite honest as well, the ability to win, and Cat touches on this. Every coach wants to win. While Maurice is in a winning situation without having to really do too much other
Yeah.
than coach them up. And who knows?
Exactly.
That's a very invigorating feeling. I don't want to Florida. And I think if it was anywhere else other than Florida, I think Paul Maurice would still be on the sideline waiting for a job. Couple of other suggestions that I quickly want to touch on. We found out today Luke Richardson is the new head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks, formerly
Yep.
an assistant with the Montreal Canadiens under Alex Burrows and most recently with Martin St. Louis. What do you make of this for the direction of the Blackhawks organization? Oops.
Sorry.
Did you mute?
I bumped it. Sorry. I bumped it accidentally.
Okay. Sorry.
They are a
You
team.
were talking and
No, that's
you
okay.
didn't get a word of what you had to say, and I'm sure it
Okay.
was pretty beautiful. So start again.
Chicago is a team in transition. They are in an interesting spot. See, for me, if I'm Paul Maurice, even though you want to coach in the NHL, there's only 32 jobs. That job is designed for a younger guy who just wants a chance to prove himself and to get into the circle and into the cycle of coaches and in the wheelhouse that your name is known and whatever, and you gain experience and you make connections and you network and so on. Luke Richardson has never been a head coach in the NHL before. This is a great opportunity for him, but you're not going to do great. Like, that team is got some older players and it's got some really good younger players, and it's trying to figure out how do they move from previous dynasty to sort of a new footing with the players they have, like Seth Jones and Alex DeBrincat and some of these types of players. So I totally get why Luke Richardson ends up in that job and not Pete DeBoer, Paul Maurice, Barry Trotz. Like, those guys don't want to go to a team that's going to take 5 years to figure out what they are and move away from old players and old salaries and now get to young and then go through that whole process again. So the veteran coaches want to go to places like Florida, like Las Vegas, right? Like even Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a little bit of a unique one, and that's Tortorella's a veteran, but he can turn any sow's ear into a silk purse. In a short period of time, he will get Philadelphia to play hard and to play well. But again, I just, what's interesting, now you bring this up, what about Andrew Burnett as an option for the Jets? A young coach
it's
looking for an
Rob was
opportunity?
suggesting that too.
Yeah. I don't know what he's like. Like, is he more defensively oriented or not? He had a Florida team that was very high powered, but
It's interesting because Florida had the most goals in the history of the NHL when it came to the salary cap era. Didn't necessarily pan out in the playoffs. Had a pretty good goaltending tandem too in Sergei Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight. So it's interesting. He's an option, right? Until he's not.
yeah.
Other thing I wanted to touch on, General Manager Don Sweeney getting an extension in Boston after moving on from Bruce Cassidy. Your thoughts? It seems to me like whatever ritual Boston is going to go through here the next little bit, it'll be under the direction of General Manager Don Sweeney.
Yeah, it's going to be and is that a surprise to you? Because Sweeney and Oh, what's his name?
Neely.
Cam Neely. Oh yeah, he's a good hockey player. Oof, good hockey player. But Cam Neely and Don Sweeney was played on the team with him that went up with the Bruins that went up against the Oilers in the Stanley Cup final in 1990 and almost won. But I can see like the way these two guys they're kind of tied together. They're buddies. They've been friends for a long time. And I is it Sweeney works for Neely? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Neely's like just slightly higher in the
Yeah,
pecking order.
Sweeney works for Neely.
Okay. But they probably work together. They like each other. They respect each other so much that
Yeah, and the thing is interesting, right? Because now the Cassidy's no longer a part of that. That kind of it's interesting, right? And they kind of, the message gets too old to kind of move on, right? So this
have
is
they
that
found a
whole.
coach yet? Have the
Sorry,
Bruins found a coach?
the Bruins. Right now it looks like Dan Quinn, former New York Ranger head coach, had the inside track for that job in Boston.
Okay.
It'll remain to be seen.
Okay. Has not been announced yet. Okay.
Has not been announced. Just quickly on the way out, Red. Blake Wheeler, number 3 on the puck-friendly Puckpedia daily face-off. Yeah, so it's the daily face-off website trade targets in advance of next week's draft. What do you make of that? I mean, that kind of caught a lot of people by surprise. Do you think there's any legitimacy to the Jets captain being on the move?
It's possible. Listen, where does that stuff kind of come from? Is it just play or just these guys? They look and they say which contracts are real bad albatrosses for general managers, and what would they like to get rid of, and who could potentially take it? You know what? If the Jets, I mean, I love Blake Wheeler. He's not the Blake Wheeler of 10 years ago or 8 years
Right.
ago, even 5 years ago. He's been a great Jet, a great captain, a great player, a great ambassador. He wanted to play in Winnipeg. He never said anything negative. He brought his family up here. He built a house up here. So you can't say anything bad about Blake Wheeler, but hockey's a business, and he's got still, I think 3 years. 3 years left on that contract at $8 million per. He is not the player that he was 5 years ago. That $8 million freed up by being taken by another team could be really helpful.
But even if the Jets have to trade him and they have to take 50% of that, that's $4 million that could be used elsewhere. If you have to eat money to move Wheeler. But to be honest, I was surprised at the moment, but I'm not really surprised, right? I mean, it could be both player and team willing to knowing that a change of scenery for both sides might be the best. He's the only holdover from the Atlanta Thrashers, which is interesting.
He's the only remaining holdover. You're right. Now that Brian Little is gone. Yep.
Well, so I find it to be an interesting thing, and that kind of sets the tone next week. The draft is next Thursday night. Our plan is to have a show next week sometime to wrap up the rumor mill. I think we'll do 1 or 2 more shows before taking a break for the summer because it is next week is the draft. The following week is the start of free agency.
So the draft is next Friday, like July the 7th?
Draft is next Thursday.
Thursday, July the 6th?
Thursday, July 7th, and Friday, July 8th. So,
okay.
Yeah, so that's going to happen in Laval Province. The Jets have 2 first-rounders. We'll talk about that draft.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew Kopp.
As it gets closer. Thank you, Andrew Kopp, for giving the Jets another first-round pick. And I'm distracted by a cricket here. But I'm looking at straight across. Never know what's going to walk into this office. Frauds in the middle of the football show. Now crickets. I think I better.
You got to call Poulin.
Sorry?
You got to call Poulin or Orkin.
Yeah. It's Terminator. Anyway, thank you everybody for making us a part of your Monday. We'll see you next week sometime. Brett will firm up the plans for that closer to. I'm not sure if we're going to do Monday. I'll talk to you about that when we get off the air. And we'll promote that going forward as well. Thanks to our commentators as well for the interaction, Rob and Kat. And thank you for everybody watching on demand. Exciting era for streaming on Game Time TV begins later on this week. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for that. You missed it. Daryl Media and Viazit have agreed to part ways after July 31st to make way for a new era in streaming for Game Time TV. Excited to announce that in the coming days, in the coming weeks. Thank you for all the support. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Game Time TV MB, and on Instagram, Instagram, just at Game Time TV MB. You can find us on YouTube as well. We need to get to 100 subscribers to get a youtube.com/Game Time TV MB. So you know what to do, folks. We're a couple away from that. And then you'll be able to find us on YouTube quite easily. On behalf of my co-host, Red Petty, this is Michael Justin. Thank you very much. And we'll talk to everybody next week. It's draft week. Let the rumor mill begin. I can't wait because the business of hockey is just getting started off the ice, even though the on-ice product finished last night. For Michael Gill, he's Red Petty. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.